everybody. My name is Alex Elliker. I'm the conflicts solicitor in regards to this zoning application submitted by the Tel-Hai retirement community. So I'm going to go over a couple of quick procedural items, and then we'll turn this over to the applicant who has the burden in this case. For record purposes, we've pre-marked a few board exhibits, and I'll take the time to kind of go through them. And I'm going to be a little bit exhaustive with the first one, just so it kind of sets the stage for what's happening here tonight. So board exhibit 1 is going to be a notice of public hearing, and I'm going to generally read it out what it had stated. It is, please take notice that the zoning hearing board, Honeybrook Township, Chester County, PA, will hold a public hearing on today's date at 6:30 here at the Township Municipal Building to consider the application of Tel-Hai Retirement Community requesting variances from, there's multiple here, section 1603.J.5.C of the 2000 Township Zoning Ordinance as amended, which we'll refer to as the 2003 ordinance, which is also, in parentheses, section 27-1604.J.5.C of the 2008 Township Zoning Ordinance as amended, and we'll refer to that as the 2008 ordinance. And that is in regard to maximum impervious coverage, section 1603.J.5.B of the 2003 ordinance, or 27-1604.J.5.B of the 2008 ordinance in regards to maximum density of development. The third one is section 1603.J.5.E of the 2003 ordinance, also known as, also in parentheses, section 1604.J.5.E of the 2008 ordinance, and that is in regard to building limitations and length. The fourth one is section 1603.J.5.I of the 2003 ordinance, also 27-1604.J.5.I of the 2008 ordinance in regard to open space requirements. And finally, section 27-1604.J.5.F.4 of the 2008 ordinance in regard to an agricultural setback requirement. And these are in order to do the following: to amend the existing township settlement agreement of 2008, which approved the applicant's 25-year master plan, and modify the existing master plan to be able to construct an ambulance center and proposed cottages such that the maximum impervious coverage shall not exceed 35% of gross tract area or 40% of net tract area, which increases it originally from 30% and 35% respectively. Number 2, to change the maximum density of development to meet but not exceed 4.7 dwelling units per acre, which is an increase from 4.3 dwelling units per acre. Number 3, to allow buildings in addition to those shown on Exhibit C of the Township Settlement Agreement to be constructed, provided that applicable density limitations are adhered to, and the maximum building length is 365 feet. Number 4, to allow environmentally sensitive lands be included in the 30% calculation of minimum open space. And number 5, to allow the proposed ambulance center and proposed cottages to be within the 100-foot agricultural setback. The subject properties are located in the A Agricultural Zoning District off Tree Line Drive, Beaver Dam Road, and Park Road, and they have the following tax parcel numbers: 22-10-10.1, 22-10-10.1B, 22-10-10.1D, and 22-10-55. Thank you for bearing with me through that. Exhibit B2 is going to be the affidavit of publication that notice, which I previously read at B1, was published in the Daily Local News in their April 12th and April 19th publications. Exhibit B3 is an affidavit from the executive assistant of the township certifying that the notice was posted at the township building on April 12th, 2023. Exhibit B4 is is an affidavit of posting from the zoning officer of the township, Edgar Nelson, with pictures stating that the parcel IDs, those 4 parcels which I previously read, were all posted, and there's maps and pictures of each of those properties as posted. Approximately, I believe each parcel has a map and a picture of posting. Exhibit B5 is going to be a certification of notice signed by me as a solicitor for this evening that a hard copy of the notice was mailed to the applicant and adjacent and nearby property owners on April 15th and emailed to the applicant's attorney on April 11th of this year. And finally, Exhibit Board 6 is a copy of the zoning application as submitted for the various variances by the applicant. Exhibit B7 then will also be your zoning ordinance. Now, before we proceed, there's just for procedural purposes, at zoning hearings, the public may have an opportunity to give public comment at the end, whether they're for or against any type of application. But as also part of that process, if you're here on behalf of this application, you may also seek party status. And party status is usually given to adjacent or nearby neighbors and landowners of the property that would like to have a little bit more rights as far as the procedural process for this hearing. If you have standing, that gives you the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses presented by the applicant. It gives you the opportunity to present exhibits and your own witnesses. It also gives you the right to file an appeal to any decision, if you would, to the Chester County Court of Common Pleas in this case. If anybody is in the crowd has any questions in regards to that or is requesting party status, please raise your hand at this time. Seeing none, I see a solicitor here on behalf of the township. The township's automatically granted party status in this case. Is the township participating in this?
Yes, we are. Beth Cole, Township Solicitor, Runningbrook Township.
Okay. We have a question in the crowd. Please state your name.
Yeah, Tony McKinney, I'm the current president of the Tri-Town Sportsmen's Association. We would like to know when we would get to explain our position, because I think it would directly impact whatever arrangements they're planning on making over there. I understand cottages will be built.
Okay, so 1 second.
Yeah, just
So-
when will I get to make that statement is basically my question right now.
If you, just for clarification for the record, if you'd like to just simply give a statement, you may do so at the end of the hearing after the applicant presents their case. If that's all you'd like to do, you don't need party status to give your position for or against, or just state your issue. If you'd like the opportunity to ask the applicant's witnesses questions, cross-examine, or present your own witnesses, and have the right to appeal any decision, you would have to request party status in order to do so. Is it your intention to request party status, or simply give a statement at the end?
What we primarily like to do is enter certain information into the record, which we think could impact the proceedings and some of the decisions being made going forward on where said cottages might be placed.
Okay.
So if you could tell me when I might impart that information, I'd appreciate it.
But I guess,
Mr. Solicitor, we wouldn't have any objection to the group providing information to the board,
okay.
whether or not they have party status, so.
Understood, but it's your right, if you'd like party status, to have those rights, you may do so. I just need to know one way or the other. If you'd like to just simply give a statement at the end and not have that party status, you may do so as well. Do you understand what I'm asking?
We'll take the status.
Okay, so what is the address of the association?
I'm sorry, sir?
What is the address of your association?
1274 Beaver Dam Road.
Okay, and this is adjacent, or how close to the actual properties in question here?
Well, we understand from the letter that we're adjacent. Is that if that's the map of the situation, we'd like an opportunity to examine it.
Okay, so there'll be certain exhibits that the applicant will present, but I believe you did receive notice of the hearing by being either adjacent or within a certain amount of feet to the actual property. So if that's still the current case, this would be a normal procedure where you guys would give them party status, but I think that would be an option for you, unless you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask them
I do have a few.
Sure. So for that, I'll just make sure you're sworn in. If you're going to be answering specific questions in regards to the status of the association, okay?
George, your name, please. Do you swear that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And can you please again state and spell your name?
I'm sorry.
Can you spell your name?
Minnichini, first name Anthony.
And what is your title in regards to the association?
I am the current president of the Tri-Town Sportsmen's Association, so the senior authority available to make decisions on this behalf.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brian Nagel. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Tel-Hai. It's my understanding that you said it's the Tri-County Sportsmen's Association? Tri-Town
Yes.
Sportsman Association. And you own property across the street?
The association owns the property. Again, I'm an elected official that speaks for it.
Do you have a resolution from the board of directors of the association authorizing you to seek party status here this evening, in this hearing?
Our bylaws empower me to speak for the organization in all matters pertaining to the organization.
I understand that, but to enter into a legal proceeding, you would need some corporate authorization from your board to do so. Do you have that? And don't get me wrong, I'm saying whatever you want to present tonight, you're absolutely free to present it. I'm just trying to ascertain the party status question.
Let me put it this way, to make it simple, if there was such a document, I would have to write it. I would have to authorize myself, and I'm doing that. I'm authorizing myself to speak on behalf of the club. Our bylaws, again, I'm elected to represent the club in all matters that interface with the community and the greater world at large. Is that not satisfactory?
Does the association own the real estate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does the township have any questions or any objection to them having party status here?
Township does not.
Does the applicant have any objection?
No.
Okay. So, for the record, you should make a motion, if you guys have any questions, but I'd certainly recommend, based on the testimony given by Mr., I'm sorry, it's Minnichini, that, and you do not have an attorney present with you tonight, you're just simply on behalf of the association.
I'm not in trouble hearing you.
We do not have an attorney.
You do not have an
Is there a
attorney.
public address system that you folks could use? It's kind of tough back here.
We can-
No, it's working. Yeah.
Is that a little better?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to do that for you too. So with that, I certainly recommend you make a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept party status.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So with that, like I said, you'll have the opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses presented, to present your own, as well as the rights to appeal any decision that's issued on behalf of the board here tonight, okay? For the record, going through the county assessment site, there was a registered address for the association as 130 Ticonderoga Road in East Petersburg. Is there a different address that you want, would want mailings from this proceeding to go to, or is that okay if it's sent to that address?
That's Dennis's address.
Dennis's
That's our
address.
treasurer's
That's our
address.
So just, I'm sorry, yeah. So for the court reporter, you guys can't just be talking to each other, so please leave it to one individual if you're outwardly talking.
Okay, that is the current address of our treasurer who deals with.
Okay, so all I'm asking is there a different address that you prefer that any mailings from this proceeding go to?
No,
Okay, that's all. So, is there anybody else in the crowd that's requesting party status or has any questions in regards to that? Seeing no further hands raised, we'll proceed into the hearing side. One specific clarification, the applicant is requesting about 5 variances. So anytime that an applicant in a zoning hearing process requesting variances, it is their burden to be able to show that they establish the different requirements of the zoning ordinance throughout, as amended throughout this township. They'll have the opportunity to present their case, their reasons why through testimony and exhibits here. And then, like I said, after they present their witnesses, you have the opportunity to cross-examine them. Once they rest their case, that will be your opportunity to present any evidence or witnesses that you would like to present in regards to this specific application, okay? And finally, before we proceed, I pre-marked the board exhibits B1 through, I believe, B7. Is there any objection from any of the parties to any of those exhibits, or would anybody like to examine those before they're officially made part of the record?
No, thank you, no objection.
Okay.
No objection.
Is that no objection?
No objection.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll turn this over to the applicant. If you'd like to make an opening statement, you may certainly do so, or you can simply move forward with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Good evening, Brian Nagel on behalf of Tel-Hai. Do you want me to use a microphone, or can you hear me okay?
I can hear you when you're facing me, yes. Are you going to walk away?
I might. I'll do my best to keep my voice up for you. Unless you want me to get to a microphone.
There is one, I don't know if there is one. You could bring that out to the center if you prefer. Okay, I'm sure it plugs in.
Yes, sir.
I love usually, if they don't care, center a number of times, but don't care,
Well, perhaps not.
Here you go. There you go. We're here.
Found it?
Yep. All right. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Now we just have to make sure nobody trips over the cord. Good evening. My name is Brian Eagle, counsel for Tel-Hai. I don't need a lengthy, Mr. Elliker, you gave a good summary of what the application is, but I'll just give a little more history so that folks understand the background. It was back in 2008 when there was a legal proceeding which was settled between the township and Tel-Hai retirement community for the ultimate master plan approval for the 35-year or 25-year master plan build-out for the Tel-Hai campus. And that included a number of different improvements that are shown on the master plan, which our registered landscape architect witness, Alex Peel, will testify about this evening. That was approved by this zoning hearing board. There was a settlement agreement entered into between the township and Tel-Hai. That was then presented to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board approved a number of variances for that master plan. Since that time, Tel-Hai has undertaken to begin execution on that master plan, and over the course of time discovered that they needed to add some cottages to the plan to serve the needs of their residents and the community at large. And it impacts a number of different things in terms of their operations and their abilities to serve the folks who live over at Tel-Hai. You'll hear details about that from the CEO, who will be our first witness, David Schenk. You mentioned the variances are really just minor modifications of the variances that were already granted by the zoning hearing board, with the exception of one variance that you'll hear about that pertains to some open space calculations. A lot of this is driven by the unique physical hardship of Tel-Hai, which is that it has a very large amount of constrained lands on the overall campus. So that drives a lot of this. So that's the relief that's being sought here tonight. It's minor modifications from relief that was previously granted. The township and the applicant had stipulated that the prior variances are not an issue in this hearing. It's just a modification to allow for the change to the master plan, which you'll see. There's the 2008 master plan, which was the one that was approved at that time. And now we're talking about the 2021 master plan. And the reason it's the 2021 master plan and we're sitting here in 2023 is because that's how far back the planning for this modification goes. So this is the culmination of about 2 years of work by my client and the township to get to this point. You also heard about the construction of an ambulance location. This application is not proposing the construction of an ambulance location. When we went through the process, essentially it became clear that the parties wanted to make part of the Tel-Hai campus available for the construction of a new ambulance EMS station if it was needed by the local ambulance company. And Mr. Shen can explain that in further detail. But the Tel-Hai project does not include a new ambulance facility, an EMS facility on the Tel-Hai campus. That's just land that's being provided by Tel-Hai that would be available if that were ever to come to fruition. So with that, I'll proceed with calling our first witness, Dave Shank, unless there's any initial questions. I think the easiest thing to do will be, should we put the witness up there so he can use the microphone? That might be better. You want to see, is that okay with the board?
Yep.
So just remain standing for a minute, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry to put you up at the dais, but we want to make sure everybody can hear. Mr. Shen, can you please state by your full name and by whom you're employed and what your position is?
Yes, I'm Dave Shank, the CEO, President and CEO of Tel-Hai Retirement Community.
Can you spell your last name again?
Shank, S-H-E-N-K, David, first name.
And can you please provide a summary of what Tel-Hai is?
Yes, Tel-Hai is a nonprofit retirement community. It serves approximately 800 residents in 3 different levels of care. We have what we call residential living, a lot of folks call it independent living. Personal care is the middle level, and then we have skilled nursing care. In addition to that, we serve 37 low-income housing folks in apartments on our campus that's subsidized by the USDA Rural Housing Administration. We also provide home care services, therapy services, and have a child daycare center on campus.
So that community would be what we consider a continuing care retirement community, correct?
Exactly.
And what are your duties as the CEO of Tel-Hai?
I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the campus and provide overall leadership and direction to the organization. In that capacity, I also help to plan for the needs of both current residents and future residents who are looking to move to Tel-Hai. And I report to a nonprofit board of directors.
Do your duties as CEO include ensuring that the demand for housing units is met in terms of what you have to deliver to residents or would-be residents who want to live at Tel-Hai?
Yes, along with our marketing team, I evaluate the demand for all levels of accommodations for the whole continuum of at Tel-Hai, from independent living to personal care to skilled health care. We've been experiencing a high demand for more cottages on campus. That's the single duplex and duplex cottages that we provide. And many times this is where residents prefer to begin their stay at Tel-Hai, at the cottage level rather than in the larger apartment buildings.
And when you say the continuum, does that mean that the status of residency and the levels or the types of housing that a resident starts in and finishes in as they progress through the different types of housing?
Exactly, yes.
I'm just going to provide the board with some pre-market exhibits that we're going to walk through.
Thank you.
Are you familiar, Mr. Schenk, with the 2008 settlement agreement that was entered into between Tel-Hai Retirement Community and Huntingburg Township?
Yes, I'm familiar with that, and this was entered into by the prior administration when Joe Swartz was the CEO.
And are you familiar with the master plan and the various variances and elements of the master plan that stemmed from the 2008 settlement agreement that was entered into between the township and Tel-Hai?
Yes, I am.
And that would it be fair to call that plan the 2008 master plan?
Yes.
The 2008 settlement agreement included a number of variances that had to be reviewed and ultimately approved by the zoning hearing board at that time, correct?
Yes.
And that occurred?
It did, yes.
And does Tel-Hai still own all of the real estate that it owned at that time?
It does, for about 149 acres of real estate.
Did you, I mentioned in the introduction that you experienced some challenges with the types of units that you had available and versus units that people were looking for to meet the needs of your residents and people looking to come live in Tel-Hai. Was that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Can you explain what those challenges were?
Yes, we've experienced changing dynamics in our market. In the 15 years since this master plan was adopted, we found that residents who are planning to move to Tel-Hai have a clear preference for the cottage product, much more so than the larger apartment settings. So we have the most demand for that level, that type of product. We're also experiencing a significant decline in our census in the skilled nursing center. This is creating some financial and operational challenges for us. As you're aware, the local hospital, Brandywine Hospital, closed a year and a half or so ago. The addition of independent living units helps support the ongoing care for skilled nursing and personal care residents, as Medicaid funding does not nearly cover the cost of care for those residents. We provide a significant and benevolent care for residents who have depleted their resources, almost $4.5 million worth of care per year and that has gone up almost double over the last decade. But all in all, these changes are necessary to ensure the continued success of our community and meeting our goal to serve the population we serve as a nonprofit corporation.
So does that mean essentially that as a resident goes from like a cottage to an apartment into more of a skilled care, you need to subsidize some of the skilled care? Is that a fair statement?
Exactly, yes. We also subsidize some of the personal care level, that middle level of care as well.
And so as a nonprofit corporation, you're able to do that?
Yes.
And that relieves essentially the government of some of the burden of doing that because you're filling that hole. Is that a fair statement?
It does, yes.
So as a result of those challenges, in order to be able to continue to provide the care to the folks as they move through the continuum of units at your facility, you had to make some changes to the master plan and thus request changes to the settlement agreement?
That's correct.
So what did you do?
We approached the township about some proposed revisions to the settlement agreement that would help address these issues. We needed to develop some areas of campus that were not in the prior master plan. And the folks on our waiting list of future residents desire, like I said before, to live in a cottage, but we don't have that many that open up each year. And so the waiting list has become quite lengthy for that level, for the cottage product.
And did the township agree with the changes you were seeking to make?
Ultimately, yes, because the township recognized that we could not deliver units that folks would occupy. But the township also asked us to address a number of numerous issues in light of the changes that we were asking for.
Okay, I'm going to show you a document marked A1 for identification. And I think you're pretty familiar with it, but I have it up here at the table in case anybody wants to look at it. I didn't make a ton of copies, I put one at the dais. Is it fair to say this is the amendment, what's called the amendment to agreement, which is the revision to the 2008 settlement agreement?
Yes, that's the amendment to the 2008 settlement agreement.
And that includes all the things you've been talking about so far tonight in terms of things the township asked for and changes to the agreement and the variances
Yes.
that are contemplated.
Yes,
That are being presented to this board this evening.
yes.
I'm going to show you what I marked A2 for identification. That's the application that was filed for this zoning hearing this evening, correct?
That's correct.
And is it fair to say that A1, the amendment to agreement, is contingent upon the zoning hearing board granting the modifications to the variances that we're seeking this evening?
Yes, that's correct.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that there were some issues that the township, in the context of the amendment agreement, asked Tel-Hai to address things that amount to benefits essentially for the community. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
Can you run through what some of those things were that Tel-Hai was asked to address?
Yes, happy to do that. They asked us to look at the site triangle of the sign on the west entrance at Tree Line Drive and Beaver Dam Road. And so we have already moved that sign farther away from the Beaver Dam Road to increase that site triangle. Also, they asked for a traffic study to be conducted. We've already done the traffic counts, but the Tel-Hai will pay for and construct any improvements that are recommended by that study. The third thing, they asked us to secure emergency access license for emergency access from Park Road coming in from the north side. And we've done that with the Saltzer's neighbor families, 2 families. They also asked basically to preserve the woodlands. There's about 23-acre parcel on the northwest part of our campus that's wooded. And they asked that we do a permanent deed restriction that would be executed to require existing trees to be preserved on that tract. And that would happen upon the expiration of some applicable bonds that we have. Also, there's some additional voluntary contributions that they were seeking by Tel-Hai. One was, we talked about earlier, offering a location for the Elverson Honeybrook area EMS to potentially build a ambulance station on our campus. And as Brian said, that may not be happening anytime in the near future, but it's available to them if they would come back to us and ask for that. In addition, we've been asked to provide some funds toward a future ambulance station, even if it's not built on Tel-Hai's campus. So we've offered a significant contribution toward that when that would happen. And we also offered to assist in a capital fundraising campaign to help raise money for an ambulance station, whether it's on our campus or in Honeybrook or some other location. And then the payment in lieu of taxes, we are a nonprofit, as you know, but we do what's called pilot payment in lieu of taxes. And all the cottages that we have and the ones that we're proposing to build, we pay as if it was a full tax assessed value. We pay the same amount as if they were taxed and not in nonprofit status. So that's an additional revenue to the township for the cottages. And then lastly, we already contribute for every residential living unit. We contribute a certain amount to the fire company, the ambulance, EMS, and the library each year for each unit. And we've offered to increase that amount by 15% now, and then after after 5 years, another 15% increase again in that voluntary contribution.
Quick clarification on the payment in lieu of taxes for the cottages. Is that the proposed new cottages or all of your cottages?
It's all of our cottages, including the new ones, yes.
And for the three contributions, the EMS, library, fire company, do I have those right?
Yes, EMS, fire company, and library, yes.
And under the prior arrangement, those were just a fixed number, correct?
Yes,
So this new arrangement provides for basically escalations to those so that they go up over time.
yes, an inflationary factor, something like 3% a year, I think, over time.
And all the things you just testified about were agreed to as part of the A1, the amendment agreement, is that right?
That's correct.
I mean, is it fair to say that the number of cottages that's shown on the 2021 master plan is less than what you originally had sought from the township?
Yes, we were seeking 52 cottages, and I think the final number is 46.
And it's also fair to say that when you were seeking the cottages initially, you were trying to develop partially in the protected wooded area that you mentioned. And essentially, the township said, we want to preserve that. We'd rather you intersperse the new cottages within the existing campus. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, yes.
Is that what you did?
And that's what we did, yes.
And with respect to the preservation of the woodlands that you mentioned, part of A1 includes that Tel-Hai, if all this goes forward, would provide a deed restriction that would prevent that area from ever being developed. Is that right?
From ever being developed. The only caveat to that is they asked that we might put in a walking path in that area if the township would approve that.
Okay, so then,
But no building, no construction of buildings.
okay, so essentially, the township would get a deed restriction. You mentioned the bonds. Once the bonds are cleared out, that deed restriction would apply and would be recorded.
Right.
But nevertheless, the restriction on development of that would be a condition of any variances, modifications of variances that the board would grant here this evening. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
I don't have any further questions for this witness.
So at this time, we'll go around first to the association. At this time, if you have any specific questions just for Mr. Shank based on his testimony, now would be your time to ask questions, okay?
Mr. Elliker, can I just make a point on that?
Sure.
Just so you know, our next witness is our registered landscape architect who will put the plan up and show what exactly it is that's being proposed. So if you might have questions about that, he's going to be a better witness. If you have a question for Mr. Shank, it would be on what he just testified about.
I do have a question for Mr. Shank. Mr. Shank, are you familiar with the mission and the activities at the Tri-Town Sportsmen's Association?
I am, yes.
Okay. Would it be your intent to inform your new tenants that this activity exists and that this facility exists within hearing range of where they're moving?
I think that's a good idea. I can't say that that's something that our marketing team probably talks about a lot when folks move in, but I think I think that's a fair request. And And the reason I say that is I do occasionally get complaints from our residents, as you know, about the sound.
We have great respect for the mission of Tel-Hai. We have a number of your folks who are actually members of our association. We just want to live in peace and harmony with you. It hasn't always been that way. So I just want to make sure, and for the record, that your prospective tenants will be aware of what they're moving next door to.
Yes, I think we can commit to sharing that information with applicants when they move in, when they're signing up for residency there.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Does the township have any questions for Mr. Shank?
We do not.
Any of the board members, do you have any questions based on his testimony?
Not at this time.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
The applicant will call his next witness, Alex Peel.
Do you mind stating?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Could you please state and spell your name and tell us by who you are employed?
Yes. My name is Alexander Peel, Alexander. Last name is P as in Peter, IEHL, and I'm employed by RGS Associates, land planning civil engineering firm.
And you're a registered landscape architect, correct?
Yes,
And that comes with licensure from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
that's correct.
I'm going to direct your attention to what I've marked as Exhibit A3 for identification. Could you identify that and please briefly describe your background and experience for the members of the board?
Yes, so this is a resume that provides some background on my career and education. My background is as a landscape architect with a bachelor's degree from West Virginia University in landscape architecture, as well as a master's degree from Penn State, also in landscape architecture. As noted, I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Pennsylvania. I've been working for approximately 25 years now and registered for approximately 20 years at this point. My role at RGS is as a principal, so I am part owner of the firm. As part of my duties, I oversee teams that work on land planning, civil engineering projects throughout the south central region of Pennsylvania primarily. And really through that work, we lead the land planning and civil engineering process for a variety of project types, including a number of continuing care retirement communities throughout the region.
And in that capacity, is it fair to say that you've worked on all of the plans that will be presented this evening for the 2021 master plan?
Yes, that's correct.
And isn't it also true that you worked on the 2008 master plan?
Yes, at this point, I'm approaching 19 years at RGS, so one of my first jobs there was Tel-Hai, and was working on plans that led up to the 2008 master plan.
And you were involved in approvals through the township at that time, correct?
That's correct. I was involved with the, with the site design as well as the, working through the settlement agreement language, with the attorneys.
At this time, I would offer Mr. Peel as an expert, as a registered landscape architect in land planning, landscape architecture, and land development, design, and civil engineering.
Is there any objection from the association in regards to Mr. Peel being entered as an expert in those fields?
Objections?
No objections?
No objections.
The township?
No objection.
So at this time, unless you have additional questions for Mr. Peel in regards to his experience, based on the information and testimony presented, I recommend a motion to accept him as an expert in, what were the fields you said, in landscape and architecture?
As an expert registered landscape architect in land development, landscape architecture, and civil engineering, land development design.
I make a motion to accept that.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Were you present during Mr. Schenk's testimony this evening?
Yes, I was.
Are you familiar with the variances that were granted by the zoning hearing board, the zoning hearing board's 2008 decision?
Yes, I am.
How many variances were granted at that time, if you remember?
There were 7 variances granted at that time.
And several of those have to be modified in order to proceed with the 25-year master plan that was contemplated at that time, as Mr. Schenk testified. Do you agree with that?
Yes, that's correct.
And those are essentially minor adjustments, would you consider them?
Yes.
We'll get into the details of those. You're familiar with what I marked A2 for identification, which is the application for variances that was
Yes.
filed for this evening's hearing?
Yes, I am.
In addition to, how many of the variances need to be modified?
I believe that it's 4 to be modified.
And is there any other aspect of the plan? We talked about the location of the ambulance station that requires a variance to be granted by this board.
That's correct. There's one additional variance that's related to the 100-foot agricultural setback for the ambulance center and for cottages that are proposed.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to run through each of the modifications and the variance that you just mentioned. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you to show the various plans, and then you can use whichever plans you deem appropriate to describe the variances that you walk through, if that's okay.
Yes. I can.
Let's start with what we've marked A4 for identification. That's the 2021 master plan.
Trying to figure out the logistics.
Why don't we just have you identify each exhibit? You don't have to really go over anything. I'll let you do that as you go. But if you want to give an overview, but you might find it most suitable to use A6 because that's probably going to be the easiest one to see. So what you have on the board is the 2021 master plan, correct?
That's correct.
And that's last revised, is it October 5th maybe of 2022? Is that right?
This one is actually October 20th.
October 2020, that's just me getting to April, okay?
Yep.
And then how about A5, which would be the 2021 open space plan?
Yes.
And would that be the same last date of revision?
No, that's October 5th.
Oh, there you go.
2022.
Okay, that's in there somewhere.
That's the date.
And then how about the 2021 open space plan render? And we've marked that as exhibit A6. And that's clearly going to be the easiest one for folks to see.
Yes.
So refer you to an excerpt from the application, which lists the variances. And in the application, we bolded kind of where they were versus, or at least where they're being changed. Can you run through what section, or I can give you the section if you like, and then you can describe what each one is?
Okay.
So why don't we start with the variance from subparagraph 5C of section 1603J of the 2003 zoning ordinance as amended by the 2008 zoning ordinance to permit the maximum impervious coverage to be calculated on the gross acreage, provided that the maximum impervious coverage shall not exceed 35% of the gross tract area or 40% of the net tract area.
Yes, and would it make sense as this relates to what's being proposed to just give a brief overview of the master plan?
It would.
As it's relevant to the impervious cover.
Sure.
So I'll try to just project for this part, just so as I point. Are you able to hear me okay, sir?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Tel-Hai Retirement Community that's highlighted in the green. Just for orientation, Beaver Dam Road is here, Park Road is here. There's existing gravel farm lane that runs across the north side of the property. This is actually relevant to the license agreement that was noted earlier for emergency access. So there's access for emergency purposes only from this farm lane, from daily access from the main entrance that would remain unchanged, as well as the tree line drive access off of Beaver Dam Road that would also not be modified. The only modification that was made there, as noted by Mr. Schenk, was that the sign that existed there, the township had requested that be moved further back for better sight distance. So that change has already been taken care of in advance of any other approvals. Moving to the north, up the main drive, if you're familiar with that at Tel-Hai. This is the main building here that includes common space, assisted living, skilled care beds, chapel space for the community. To the east, along the eastern side of the property, this red box represents where the proposed ambulance building would be proposed. And this red dashed line indicates an area where there's existing skilled care that's envisioned to probably be redesigned and reworked in the future. Just again, as Mr. Schenk noted, the evolution of the continuing care model. Moving up or over to the west, the existing daycare is located in this area. We are showing 3 cottages here and 2 cottages here. Moving to the north, all of these cottages in the light beige color, those are all existing, as well as the main building here. This is the ridge line point, so this is the water tower, again, for point of reference. On the east side, these darker brown boxes here are proposed cottages that are located in proximity to the existing community building on the east side of Tree Line Drive. Moving around to the north and then to the west on Rolling Hill Circle, there's 4 more cottages proposed here and 5 cottages proposed in this area, also on Rolling Hill Circle.
Just for clarification, is it fair to say all the ones that are marked brown are the proposed cottages?
Yes, so the light beige are the existing, the dark brown are the proposed cottages, and there are 2 middle brown colors. We need a little bit better color range, which would be apartments that were previously approved as part of the master plan but have not been constructed yet.
Just two follow-up questions. So the The emergency access that Mr. Shank testified about that you pointed out on the top of the plan there, the Park Road,
Yes.
that doesn't exist today in terms of the right of access. The right of access there for emergency access is proposed as part of this project we're discussing today, right?
That's correct.
And would it be your understanding that the Sportsman's Association property is all the way down below the bottom of the plan?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly where it's located on the.
Yeah, at that pond at the base is the pond you pass on Beaver Dam Road. To the right, the club would be on the other side of Beaver Dam Road, south of what you're looking at.
So in other words, past the pond on the right and then off to the left.
If you pass the pond would be on your right, you'd be going down Beaver Dam Road about 100 yards away. The club is on the left.
So with the exception, Mr. Peel, of 5 of those cottages, the lion's share of the cottages the new cottages you're proposing are about as far away from their association property as you can get.
That's correct. They exist on, as I noted, the north side of the ridge line there.
Okay. Can I ask a question to this gentleman?
You can at his conclusion, so just make a note of what specific areas you want to question him on, and then you'll have that opportunity. Instead of having a little bit of a disjointed process, the applicant gets to go through all of their questions, and you'll have the opportunity to follow up. Okay?
Understood. Thank you.
Continue, please.
Yes, so as this is relevant to the first of the variances that we're discussing, which is impervious cover. So impervious cover is anything that covers the land that doesn't allow water to readily percolate into the ground. That would include pavement, concrete, and buildings, of course. So with the proposed amendments to the master plan, we would be adding, as noted previously, the 46 cottages and the ambulance center. So with that and the associated pavement, that leads to an increase in impervious cover. Now, with that in mind, the percentages that are requested are 35 and 40%. This is a 5% increase from the 2008 agreement, which was for 30% and 35%.
So essentially sorry, forgot about my microphone. Essentially that would be a de minimis variance from the existing zoning that exists for the property vis-a-vis the variances that were granted in 2008.
Yes.
Are you ready to go on to the next variance?
Yes, we can move on.
The next variance is for the density, going from 4.3, I believe, to 4.7. Can you explain that one, please?
Yes. So density is the calculation of the number of units per acre. So essentially, you take however many homes that are proposed on a property and then divide that by the acreage. Tel-Hai is a little unique because they have, as we've been talking about, different types of homes or on their property or units per se. So the density calculation would be 1 for every 2 beds is considered a unit, and then for every cottage, which is what we're proposing, would be considered a unit. So the previous master plan or settlement agreement, as Brian noted, was to allow 4.3 units per acre. So for every acre of land, you could have up to 4.3 units per acre. Again, just with the addition of the 46 cottages, that increases the number of units by 46, which then requires the need to increase your maximum density to 4.7 units per acre. So again, this would be a 0.4 unit per acre increase for the property.
And again, that's a percentage increase. That's less than 10%. So relatively in the range of de minimis.
That's correct.
And in terms of overall density, 4.7 is pretty low in your experience, would you say? as compared to other similar types of developments?
Yes, absolutely, especially when you have multifamily buildings, which would be apartment buildings, and you also have, assisted living and skilled care buildings, where essentially your number of residents or units is higher than, say, you would have with just a single-family detached residential development. So in the scale of density, there's a wide range. We work with communities that are permitted up to 15 units per acre.
Thank you. Are you ready to move on to the next one?
Yes.
Okay, the next one pertains to section 1603J5E of the 2003 zoning ordinance. That would be 1604J5E of the 2008 ordinance. It's similar to what was granted in the 2008, and it has to do with the building length of 165 feet. Can you explain that one, please?
Yes. Really, the request for the length isn't changing as part of this request. What the factor is here was when this was requested as part of the original master plan, it was specifically oriented to this building, which is known as the Stonecroft building.
And when you say this building, just for the record, can you describe where on the plan that is?
Yes. So it is in the northwest portion of the site, and it is located off of Tree Line Drive.
So it's a large building that's kind of in the shape of an E with a little protrusion off the back of it. Is that right?
That's correct. And the Stonecroft building includes apartments as well as a pool that's used by the community, or at least still work with the school district, as well as a community building. So the original settlement agreement had an exhibit that was specific to the Stonecroft building with dimensions and to grant that relief. Where we saw the need to add this or to clarify the ability really is coming down to what I noted earlier on the southern side of the site would be the existing main building. As you can see, this is a similar, different shape, but same configuration with multiple wings and much longer length than the proposed cottages. And as I noted earlier, there's a likelihood that there will be redesign of the existing skilled care facility.
So that would just allow that redesigned building to be essentially the maximum length provided for the other buildings.
That's correct.
And you're referring to the building that's to the west of the kind of red EMS ambulance location that you pointed out earlier, correct?
That's correct. So the purpose of that modification was just to not make it solely specific to the Stonecroft building.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready to move on to the next variant?
Yes.
Or modification, I guess I should say. That pertains to the 30% constrained land to be permitted as open space, the requirement from section 1603J5I of the 2003 zoning ordinance, 1604J5I of the 2008 ordinance. Can you explain that one? It's a little more nuanced.
That's correct. So I believe, as Brian may have noted earlier, in the current ordinance and settlement agreement, the open space calculations include constrained land and unconstrained lands. And in the case of constrained lands, you have a certain percentage or acreage of open space that's required, but you can only have 30% of that required acreage be in constrained lands. And constrained lands, just to take a step back, includes wetlands, steep slope, woodland area, basically environmental areas that are being, desired to be protected. The irony is, in the case of Tel-Hai, as we discussed on the western portion of property where the deed restriction will be for the woodlands. That also includes a stream and wetlands, other pockets of woodlands, and steep slopes around the property. That reduces, because of the limitation on the constrained lands, for what can be counted for open space, that makes it very difficult to meet the open space requirements. So what we proposed here was to still back out or not include stormwater management facilities in the open space calculation, but to ask to allow those constrained lands to be included in the open space calculations, as they're really an integral part of the open space for Tel-Hai.
Okay, thank you. And so I mentioned earlier the property, one of the unique physical characteristics of this property is the amount of constrained land. And obviously, also looking at your A6 that we have on the board, it's also quite uniquely shaped property, is that fair?
That's correct.
All of the variances that you just went through are dimensional variances, correct?
That's correct.
With respect to the modifications of the previously approved variances that you just reviewed, in your professional opinion, would those modified variances or the proposed modifications of the 2021 master plan or the modifications of the 08 plan shown on the 2021 plan have any negative effect on the neighboring properties or the township in general?
No. As you had noted, Brian, the proximity of the proposed cottages to the property boundaries, the implementation of stormwater management facilities to mitigate runoff and other, and as well as the permitting process both through the township, state, and county related to development, I would not see a negative impact.
So if the relief sought here from the zoning hearing board is granted, I think I'm hearing you say Tel-Hai still has to go through land development approval process?
That's correct, as well as the NPDS permit and ENS approval process, which is all related to earth disturbance.
And NPDS ultimately comes from DEP, correct?
Yes.
In your opinion, if the modifications are granted, will it alter the essential character of the neighborhood or have any detrimental impact?
No, what's being proposed, as you can see by the scale of the dark brown buildings to what exists on the campus, it's very much in keeping with what exists at Tel-Hai today and would be done in a similar fashion.
And with respect to all of those variances that you reviewed, the modifications that you reviewed, in order to alleviate the problems that are driven by the combination of the unique physical characteristics of the real estate and the issues of planning and economics and serving the community that Mr. Schenk mentioned, are these variances drawn to the minimum relief that will satisfy those problems?
Yes, they are.
There's a variance that pertains to the agricultural setback requirement in the zoning ordinance. Can you address that one, please?
Yes. So around the perimeter of the property at Tel-Hai, at some point in the ordinance, 100-foot setback from the property boundary, which is the dark black line that goes around the perimeter, 100-foot setback is required between that property boundary and the closest proposed buildings to it. So you'll see in some areas of the existing campus, say where the existing main building is located, you'll see development closer than that. As you come to the north, you'll see these cottages are set more than 100 feet back. There are two instances that have been noted. The first being back to the red building here, the ambulance building would be within that 100-foot setback. In that particular case, though, what we're doing is we're redeveloping an already developed portion of the campus. There's currently a maintenance building that sits in this location. That would be eliminated and the ambulance would take its place. The second instance where we're within that 100 feet are these three cottages here along the southern property line. In this particular case, these cottages adjoin with the Tel-Hai camp property, which would not be an agricultural property. So that would be within that 100-foot setback area. But again, an area that already has the daycare and drives associated with it.
In your opinion, with that variance and the resulting modification that you just reviewed on A7, sorry, A6, have any negative impact on the neighboring properties, the neighborhood, or the zoning district in general?
No, we would, the design would need to again address, any issues of runoff, screening, et cetera. So I wouldn't see that having any negative impact.
Would it alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
No.
In terms of how you've laid that out, have you minimized the need for that relief to the greatest extent possible?
Yes, we've basically, the area of the ambulance, just provided enough turning movements to still access the sewer treatment plant that's to the south of it that will exist, as well as provide vehicular access into the ambulance building, as well as with the proposed cottages. There's an existing, I think, spring house located here, so we were working to preserve that with the placement of those cottages.
Thank you. Are all of the opinions that you've offered to this board tonight drawn to a reasonable degree of professional certainty, Mr. Peel?
Yes.
May I have a brief moment?
Sure.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll go through the parties if they have any specific questions. So first to the association, based on the testimony given by Mr. Peel, do you have any follow-up questions as to any of the subject topics that he covered?
I do.
Mr. Elicker, just before I forget, if I may interrupt, excuse me, sir.
I'm sorry.
But just so I don't forget, I would ask that all of the exhibits that were presented by the applicant be admitted into the record.
We'll address that, after the questioning from the other side.
Understood, thank you.
Is there any plan for soundproofing either in the construction of the cottages themselves or in the lay of the landscape? Something that might blunt the sounds that come from our club to ensure a little more peace for the residents?
I will admit, I'm not a contractor, so I can't really speak in any detail to the building construction. I mean, certainly everything will be built to the current codes and the current specifications for insulation, windows, etc. But I don't know.
So what I'm hearing is that no additional steps will be taken to consider the club and what it does.
Yeah, not beyond what would the typical construction means would be.
I understand. No further questions. Thank you.
Does the township have any questions?
I do not.
Any members of the board?
Yeah, I have one. I don't know if it's you who just answered. With any of these buildings being proposed, is there any concern about like the height with fire engine being able to access it or anything?
No, these are these would be one-story cottages, that would be proposed. The ambulance building would also be a one-story building. So, these would be consistent in scale with the newer cottages that are out there now, which, you know, the Stonecroft building here is a multi-story apartment building, and, you know, that's accessed by the fire department at this point, so we wouldn't have any concerns with that access.
Also, is there gonna be anything on this plan for additional, like, tree buffering or anything?
Yeah, that would be part of the land development process and the subdivision land development ordinance. There's buffering requirements. With that said, along this eastern property boundary, when construction began on phase 2, which are the community building, the cottages located here off of Bay Tree Court, that landscape buffer was actually planted, and I'll venture to guess that was at least a decade ago at this point. With that said, if there were additional areas that needed buffering, that would certainly be included based on the ordinance requirements.
And the same question for parking?
Yes.
On any of these newer buildings or anything, you'll maintain whatever is required?
That's correct. The cottages would have typical driveways or sometimes some pull-off spaces for visitors. The same with the ambulance building, there would be some spaces for the fire department members for parking, but you know, the proposed cottages and ambulance buildings would require large parking areas as part of those projects.
So I have a few questions, and if you guys have any other thoughts after I go through mine, you can certainly supplement that as well. So in your application, I believe it was checked off that, is your property subject to any easements, other restrictions? There was a floodplain mentioned, and having checked the flood hazard map, is any part of your property within it? It was yes, and then there was a flood hazard map reference. Is this property in any floodplain or flood hazard?
The southern portion of it is. So as I noted earlier, this is Beaver Dam Road across the southern property line. This dark dashed line that meanders around the southern side of the property, that is floodplain area. So again, our closest proposed cottages to that would be the ones north of there, which would be roughly 200 feet away.
And is that, you don't need any additional zoning relief wherever you're outside of any floodplain setbacks in regards to that?
No, we wouldn't need any additional relief related to that.
So I want to kind of go through the, I guess, changes between the original 2003 ordinance as well as the 2008, kind of for each, to your understanding of what those requirements were.
Okay.
So let's just kind of go through variance request 1, which is in regards to the maximum impervious coverage. Are you aware of what the original requirements were and what they are now under the zoning ordinance?
So as it relates to the 2008 settlement agreement?
Yes,
Yeah.
or your knowledge of what those requirements were.
Yep, so the 2008 settlement agreement, impervious coverage amounts were 30% of the gross and 35% of the net tract area. And what we're proposing is 35% gross and 40% of the net. So that's the 5% increase that.
And are you aware of what the township's current zoning ordinance requirements would be if this was a new development? Or we're simply just going on what those previous conditions were?
I'll be honest, I was just going by what the previous conditions were as far as what the impervious coverage.
Okay. And I'll certainly allow legal argument as to which zoning ordinance applies here. If you want to give a brief explanation right now.
Yeah, this is a plan that's vested under the, 2003 zoning ordinance as it was amended by the 2008 zoning ordinance amendments. So in order to modify the plan that's vested under that ordinance, you would need to modify your relief that was granted under that ordinance or seek relief under that ordinance. And so that's the legal position, that's the relief that we need. We need it from the ordinance that applies to this approved, invested, and partially developed plan, not obviously from the current zoning ordinance.
And just for clarification, is that the township's position as well, the review?
Yes, the township agrees with that position, and the settlement agreement that was introduced, or the amendment to the agreement is applicant's exhibit A1, that was, approved by the Board of Supervisors in December of 2022, confirms that the township agrees with that position and interpretation of the proper zoning for this project. So that's before you tonight.
And that legal position has been also accepted by this board in other cases.
So going through those four, so the first one, we're talking about an increase of 5%, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And your testimony here tonight was that's a de minimis change, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you just, for layman's terms, explain why you feel that's a de minimis change from a total of 5% of the total area?
In a case like this with a developed property, where you have larger buildings with higher density or higher occupancy rates, such as skilled care assisted living buildings here on the southern side of the campus, the Stonecroft building, the community building, these types of communities, as well as all the access drives associated with providing vehicular access to the cottages, that all equates to impervious coverage that would be part of development like this. So in a case like that, when you have those expanses of impervious cover, to have an increase of 5% to address the increase or the additional cottages would be a minor increase.
Is there a percentage where you feel, all right, that's no longer de minimis if we would go to 10% extra, 20% extra? What's, I guess, in your professional terms?
I think that's a legal issue.
Okay. And if you want to defer to your
I
counsel.
don't mind answering the questions, but I think it's kind of driven by case law.
Sure. I just because he specifically said this is de minimis, I just want his professional expert opinion as to why it is de minimis.
That's fair.
Yeah. So I think in a case like this, if you started to get up over 50% impervious coverage, which would be 15% beyond, or too many pieces of paper. 15% over the gross, 10% over the net, that starts to become a more significant increase in impervious coverage.
All right. And then going to the residential dwelling units, I think we're going from the density from 4.3 to 4.7, is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, same question for these four variances here. Why do you feel that's a de minimis change?
So we're increasing the density by 0.4 units per acre, which is approximately 9%. And in a case like this, where you have a mix of multifamily or apartment dwellings, skilled and assisted care beds and cottages, a density at that level, honestly, is still low. When it comes to land use, really the goal is to have a higher density, closer to 10%, in a case like this, to just more efficiently use the land. That encourages less sprawl and more concentrated development. So to still be under 5%, I would certainly see it being de minimis.
Okay. So moving on to the third one, which I believe was the building length. Can you describe what the original requirements were? And I believe the maximum proposed here is 365 feet. Is that fair?
That's correct.
So what did you previously need, and how is that changing for here?
Yep. So in that particular case, there is no dimensional change. It's still 365 feet. What we did note as we looked through the settlement agreement was that relief was solely based on the Stonecroft building, which was a proposed building at that time as part of the 2008 settlement agreement master plan. So to make sure that we had that issue addressed in the future for potential renovation of the existing main building and, you know, possibly some other redevelopment in the future, that would be, you know, a similar scale to these buildings. We wanted to just clarify that that was just a dimensional relief and not specific to one building. And that's what we noted in the exhibits, that it was very clearly tied to just that one building.
What was the length of, I guess, the main building there on the previous plans? Was there a maximum length?
For the Stonecroft
So
building,
we're saying the Stonecroft at max was 365.
that's correct.
And in your previous plans, what was the length of the main building, you know, to the southeast there? Do you recall what those dimensions were for that building?
Has it changed?
It has not changed.
So that building is as it was in 2008, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So this change is to ensure that if that building gets redeveloped, that you maintain the ability to have that same length that was approved for the newer building.
That's correct.
And as shown, I guess, as shown as it is right now, what is that length? If you know, I'm curious, because I want it to be clear if
Right.
you go for the new development, how that changes from what it is to a maximum of 365, how much that could expand.
Just a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not holding you to an exact figure,
Yeah.
but just,
So right now, I'd say it's approximately 250 feet. I will say, if you look at the exhibit that's included from the 2008 settlement agreement, you know, there was multiple kind of lines that were measured there. So I have to be exactly sure, you know, how that will be viewed.
but is it fair to say this is more of a technicality cleanup that as proposed, you're not asking to be able to develop it further out than what's on this plan?
It could extend further than that as it's measured, because, you know, what you have with these buildings, and that's where, for instance, you know, I have to look at it, you know, does the measurement do, you know, this entire length of that corridor? So as, say, this area is being redeveloped, you know, the measurement, there could be a wing that has an elbow to it, those types of things as far as the length, so.
But obviously, any further extensions would be in line with these decisions and your master plan and agreements.
That's correct, could be within that range of dimension.
Okay. The fourth one then, the open space and the environmentally sensitive lands for the calculations. What is the, so the requirement is 30% open space, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and without the woodlands in there, do you know what the open space is?
Give me 1 second, I shuffled.
Yep.
I shuffled my papers. My summary sheet got buried, there it is, okay. So, this one, the math gets a little tricky on. Just because you get into that factor of the constrained land. So the major point that we found here is, again, we kind of revisited this as part of this proposed amendment to the agreement, is that there's 40.2 acres of constrained open space land, which, as I noted be woodland, stream, wetlands, areas like that. Through the process of working over the last several years with the township on the refinement of this design, as I think Brian noted before, the message, the goal was to not impact those constrained lands. So we had some cottages proposed in this area that we moved more into the open area here, and then some other previously developed portions of the campus. So that 40.2 under the previous agreement, you can only count 13.4 acres of that land towards the open space. So, you know, in the case of Tel-Hai, 27% of their land is considered constrained. And that's where we saw the hardship. You know, the goal and the joint goal with Tel-Hai and the township was to preserve those lands at the same time that was counting against us for our open space calculations. So ironically, for the open space calculations, you'd be better to develop in the woodlands and leave this area alone, because you get 1-to-1, you get 100% credit for that area, where here, you know, for the overall campus, you're dropping from just over 40 acres to just over 13 acres. So that's where we looked at the requested relief to include those constrained lands in the calculations.
But you don't know the exact, I guess, percentage of the open space of the property if you couldn't include?
If we couldn't include it.
And if you don't know, that's okay, but I'm just curious.
I would be, yeah, with that 30% max of the constrained lands that you're allowed to count, I'd be hesitant to try to give you an exact number on that right now. Just because there's a couple calculations you have to do to kind of back into that.
And I guess, does adding the possible walking trail to the woodlands, does that affect your percentages at all?
No, that, as part of the previous settlement agreement and master plan, you know, the community building and the associated facilities that went along with it, that was viewed as part of the open space in the calculation. So a trail, actually, on the previous master plan, there was a trail also shown in the woodland area as well. So that would not have an impact on that percentage.
Okay. And then, and I guess is what is our total open space with the constrained land in it?
So the total open space would be, as far as acreage,
Your percentage of the lot, because if we're saying it's 30% required, and you're saying we're adding in all the 40 or so acres of the woodlands, what's the total percentage that we're at here?
we're right around 36%.
So you're well above the 30%.
Yes, we are above that.
And finally, the fifth zoning requirement, was that 100-foot setback, is that the current zoning ordinance requirement, or is that at the time the agreements were reached in 2008?
That was, at the time, the settlement agreement occurred in 2008. I'm not sure what the current perimeter buffer requirement is.
Okay, and the township doesn't have an issue with, again, applying that 100-foot thing?
That's correct. The township feels that the prior ordinance is what governs this entire project. You're not picking and choosing, you know, this requirement applies here, but old requirements apply there, because the old ordinance acted as a kind of whole, just like the new one would, and so, yeah.
And so you're only, did you already receive the setbacks for all the other buildings that are on there within the 100 feet in your previous decision?
So in our previous decision, These were viewed, for instance, going back to the core building, the main building on the south side, all of the improvements that were already within that setback were just viewed as existing nonconformities. So as part of the 2008 master plan, we did not encroach into that 100-foot buffer at all, which is why that's an addition to the requested relief.
Mr. Eller, may I ask one question?
Sure.
When you say existing nonconformities, you mean existing legal nonconformities, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And for, let's go to the proposed EMS site. Why is that the proper location for it to be within the 100-foot setback versus somewhere maybe to the south where there's more open area, or somewhere that's outside of the setback?
So basically, we looked at this area, proximity to the main building, which is where the skilled care and the assisted living is all located in this building. That, I would venture to say, is the majority of the ambulance calls that are associated with the community. So proximity for the community, obviously this was an ideal location. It was an opportunity to redevelop a building that was underutilized, so a portion of the property that was already developed is being redeveloped. It also has good access to the main entrance out of the community to Beaver Dam Road.
And what's the current building that's there?
It's a maintenance building that is just underutilized at this point.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sort of in terms of the location of that ambulance building, the land to the south of that, closer to Beaver Dam Road, is it true that part of that land is encumbered by a stormwater basin?
Yes, so immediately adjacent to it, in the very small light brown box here, this area is actually the sewer treatment plant for the community. And then, I apologize, these lighter lines down here, this is an existing stormwater basin, and then there's the floodplain that we discussed earlier south of that.
And is there some type of easement that runs through that area as well?
Yes, there's a-
kind of right through that, the middle of that area.
I believe it's a utility.
A5 shows some type of easement.
It's a utility easement, I believe that is for a gas line.
And would all those features prevent that area from being a viable location for the ambulance facility and associated, access ways?
That's correct. Those would all be factors that would allow it to be placed there.
And did Tel-Hai have conversations with Elverson Honeybrook?
Yes.
EMS regarding location, and did they feel that was a reasonable location should that project go forward?
Yes, both on the location, the size of the building, there was quite a bit of interaction. So this is the footprint or the building footprint that's shown here on the plan. The access point for garage bays are all based on the design from the EMS.
And is it true that there is I don't want to misrepresent the nature of it, but there is a tentative agreement executed between Tel-Hai and Elverson Honeybrook EMS with regard to that location and the potential for a facility to work together to bring that to fruition? I believe it's within the Exhibit A1
It is.
as an exhibit to that exhibit. Is that true? You're not.
I'll defer to.
Yes, I can't testify, but I can, as a matter of fact, that yes, there's a term sheet that's part of Exhibit 6 to Exhibit A1.
Thank you.
And then the maintenance building, is it being completely demolished and this is replacing it?
That's correct.
And is this, I assume this is a little bit of a larger footprint than the maintenance building?
It is.
Okay. The actual encroachment on the setback, do you have the exact figure of how far into the 100-foot we are?
I can give you pretty close. looks like we're approximately 50 feet off of the property boundary, so approximately 50 feet into the 100-foot setback.
So it'd be fair to say that you guys are comfortable with 50 feet of encroachment per what the plan is that you proposed?
Yes.
Okay, so and finally going to those 3 cottages, why is that an optimal location for these proposed cottages versus anywhere else in the community, and how much of an encroachment are we talking for those 3?
So really what, as we noted earlier, there were a few iterations of this plan before this one. And as we noted, one of them included cottages in woodlands. What we had worked through with the township was, the desire to eliminate those and then find other locations that would work to try to recapture as many of those cottages as possible. So I think as Dave had noted, at one point we had 52 cottages proposed as part of the master plan. That number was reduced down to 46. So the process that we went through as the land planning firm was really looking for places where we could fit the cottages in along existing access drives and connection points. Topography across the site is also a factor. So in this particular case, the topography, existing access off of Tree Line Drive, all lend itself to this area working for a proposed cottage. So that's really how that location was identified.
And do you know approximately how far into the setback you are there?
Approximately 50 feet as well.
And given, I guess, your previous testimony and everything, in regards to finding the right ideal location for this, you feel that these 3 cottages is, I guess, the least intrusive in accordance with your goals of this project and staying away from the woodlands and everything, to be within the setback 50 feet there, is that correct?
That's correct. It's outside of the steep slopes, the woodlands, the wetland area. So that was our position on that location.
And the property to the south is what?
The property to the south is actually owned by Tel-Hai Camp. So that obviously is not an agricultural use. That is the camp property.
And then the property to the east of the EMS is what?
That is farm property or agricultural property.
And your encroachment, you don't believe is going to negatively impact either of those properties?
We don't believe it would.
All right, and final question, there's a lot of different parcel numbers as part of this entire community. Is all of the relief requested here all within those 4 parcel numbers that were submitted as part of the zoning application?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I know that was a lot. Thank you guys for bearing with me there. Is there any other follow-up question from the board based on my question?
You got her covered.
All right, thank you. Any other follow-up questions either from the association or the township?
I do, just one follow-up question. On the 3 units, and technically all 5 of the cottages at that southwest corner, are those all located in an area that is in fact currently developed with parking and other structures?
That's correct. So what currently exists in this area is the daycare and the associated parking.
So you're not disturbing a new area in terms of new disturbance per se? Nothing's encroaching? Is there a road along the camp property?
There's a road, actually it runs right along the camp property here. So we're actually moving that road away from the camp property with this cottage, and then that would serve the second one. So, this general area, of the property is where the daycare building and the parking and the drive that connects between Tree Line Drive and Tel-Hai Circle.
Which one specifically, sorry, is the daycare?
So it's actually not shown on this plan. It's right in the location generally of this proposed cottage.
And are you relocating the daycare, or it's staying, just explain that. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I pass the mic to Zach?
Okay, we're having, especially during COVID, there was just a lack of utilization. Less and less folks were using the daycare, and so we were considering closing it when we looked at this as a site. Then we actually changed daycare providers. We have a new daycare center operator that is being successful at it, and so we think it could be there for a number of years yet. If we get to the point that it's not being used enough by our team members, we would consider closing it. Not relocating the building, but simply we would end, stop providing that service.
And then build those proposed, or?
Yes, that would be the intent if we decide to close the center in the future. This is probably not going to happen in the next several years, 3 to 5 years.
And the three on the bottom, could you move those across the road, or it's an optimal location for 3 there and 2 above?
Yeah, there's an existing, I believe it's Spring House is located here, so that's why we basically worked the drive between it and where the proposed cottages are.
Okay. And then final question, hopefully final.
No.
The 25-year master plan, I believe when you guys entered that, were you required to complete all the improvements within 25 years? Or was there a limitation on when all the improvements had to be completed by?
There was.
And are you requesting to change that term based on getting this new relief, or we're still within that same term?
The date was updated as part of the amendment to the agreement.
Okay. And what is that date, just for?
Some date in 2035, I can get you the exact date if you want.
But it's in the exhibits.
It's in A1.
All right. No further questions from Ryan.
I have a follow-up. Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead. Yep.
The new cottages, the ones just north of the pond,
Yes, sir.
would they now be the closest dwellings to Beaver Dam Road in the complex?
Yes, they'd just be slightly closer than these. These are cottages as well over here, so yes, they would be slightly closer to Beaver Dam Road. Actually. Now, these would actually be a little bit further. The proposed ones would be slightly further than these from Beaver Dam because Beaver Dam Road is dropping to the southwest here. So these few cottages would actually
My
be
question is actually applying to their relative distance from our organization. I desperately want to maintain good relations with Tel-Hai. And what I see there with those proposed cottages is they sit on a flat where there are no intervening structures or buffering trees to deal with some of the noise. We do get complaints from time to time much further back. So I would like to recommend that maybe some consideration be made to how those are placed and constructed, perhaps with landscaping, et cetera, to somehow blunt some of the noise.
Could you potentially put a fence on the, I guess I'll call it the south side of those 3 cottages?
You could.
Or some plantings or something to have, like what the gentleman's asking about, to
I
provide
think,
additional buffering?
I think my understanding again, sir, your property is down here to the southwest.
We're down here, but we're down the road a bit. It's actually a fair distance, but we do get complaints, and I feel obligated to address them when they do come.
Nope, understood.
I'm just trying to avoid a situation that will build over time. New residents moving to new cottages, don't know there's a gun range down the road. This is not a good recipe here. I just want to make sure that that whatever we can do
Right.
to make these people comfortable, that we do.
Yep. I think what we could look at would be maybe some additional vegetation in this area. So this obviously is existing trees, wooded area, vegetation on Tel-Hai's property. We've got a little bit of a gap in here, so I think that might be more effective than putting something down on the south side of it with your property down here. So I think, take a look at that. I think there's some plantings in that area, but we should look at that further.
And just for the record, we're also working on our end. We're considering some soundproofing on the back of our rifle range hut, which is the closest building that we have to Tel-Hai. So we're trying as well. I just want to make sure that if this is an opportunity to mitigate the situation, that we take it.
Understood, thank you, sir.
I'm sorry?
Understood, thank you, sir.
Any other questions from anyone?
I do.
Yep.
I might stretch the bounds of your knowledge, but I assume you know more about building construction than I do. I know a fair amount as a land use attorney. Is it fair to say that the new cottages, given the energy efficiency requirements for construction today, will be by their very nature more soundproof than the cottages that exist on the campus today?
Yes.
For Mr. Schenk, is it fair to say that with respect to the 5 cottages that are proposed in the section that we were just talking about, in the southeast corner of the plan, that in order to have an economy scale critical mass, you would need to build at least 5 cottages? You couldn't just build 2, for example.
Yes, for economies of scale and construction, it would be much preferable. And again, trying to reach that 46 new cottage units, we would need to use all 5 of those.
And when you say trying to reach that 46 new cottages, basically when you were pushed to squeeze out from 52 down to 46, that basically squeezed you to the minimum to make this whole thing viable. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. So is there any other witnesses that you'd like to present?
No, thank you.
All right, so, and besides the entering of your exhibits, would you move you rest your case?
Rest our case and ask that the application be approved and ask that the condition be imposed that the deed restricted area as identified on the plan would be restricted from further development as a condition of the approval. That will ultimately be backed up by the deed restriction, but because of the bond issue, the deed restriction can't get recorded. So the township and Tel-Hai agreed that as a condition of any approval, that would be a condition, and then eventually gets backed up by the deed restriction.
And that's part of the 2022 agreement?
It is.
So we have at least one motion on the floor to enter into the record exhibits A1 through A6. Is there any objection from the association in regards to the exhibits that they are moving to be entered as part of the record?
No objections, just that the soundproofing question be at least considered.
Any objection from the township?
No objection.
So with that, I certainly recommend you guys would move to enter A1 through 6 into the record.
I'll, want to see if I can make a motion to, enter that.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. So with that, the applicant has rested their case. So at this time, if any other parties of standing have the opportunity to be able to present witnesses, testimony, exhibits in regards to your position on this specific matter. So if there's any other testimony, you haven't specifically given testimony, you've been sworn, you've given certain statements, but if there's specific testimony that you want to present through yourself or through another witness, now would be your time to do so. Is there anything else that you would like to present either for yourself or someone else?
No, I think we made our position clear, so not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Is there any witnesses from the township?
I would like to just speak on behalf of the
Sure.
township to the board. I think I'll stand just so you can see me behind the stenographer. As has been presented this evening. Obviously, Exhibit A1 is an agreement that the Township Board of Supervisors spent multiple years working with Tel-Hai to negotiate, and they are fully in support of the application that is before you tonight. I'm authorized to be here, and the board really would like to just convey to the zoning hearing board the amount of effort that went into that process. The township engaged its engineer to look at Tel-Hai's plans, figure out what seemed to be the best fit for the community in terms of preservation of those features that are important to the township. I believe, as was described, the intention to preserve that North Woods corridor in its untouched entirety, rather than have disturbance spread throughout the site, which is a limitation then on the calculations under the ordinance as it actually stands, but the township supports that. To read from Exhibit A1, again, the township has entered this agreement that says that the parties request that the zoning hearing board grant the variances set forth in this agreement amendment, and that it is the intent and desire of the parties that all variances necessary to permit implementation of the 2021 master plan be granted by the zoning hearing board, that all other prior variances granted pursuant to the 2008 agreement remain in full force and effect, notwithstanding the disposition of the variances under this agreement amendment. And so this evening, on behalf of the township, we respectfully request that the zoning hearing board grant the variances as requested, with the condition that the Exhibit A1 and all of the terms and obligations contained therein involving Tel-Hai be incorporated into your decision as part of the relief being granted. With that, I'm open to questions as well.
Is there any questions for the township?
No, thank you.
Any questions from the association?
No, thank you.
Any questions from the board? Okay. So with that, at this time, if there's anybody else in the audience that would like to make a statement in support of this application, against this application, or anything in relation to this application, now would be your time to do so. So just by a matter of raised hands, is how many do we have? I believe we just have one. So please stand up, state your name, and be sworn.
Sure. Jerome J. Gerald. I hope I can speak loud as I'm
Wait,
Oh,
do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes.
How do you spell your name?
Jerome. Gerald. Gerald.
And what's your address?
2297 Horseshoe Pike.
Horseshoe Pike. And is that in the township?
Yes. I just wanted to say something. Where you have your red spot for your ambulance, where's the roadway? How can they get out of there if there's an emergency? The access to that?
So you don't necessarily have to answer, but
Yeah,
this.
I was
for the record,
just questioning that, that's
for clarification.
Is that, if that's.
like, how, what would be
You can answer.
the route that would, the ambulance would take out of that building?
Yep. So there is a drive here, it might be a little hard to see, along the eastern property boundary.
Okay.
There's a drive behind the building that would provide access for the ambulances to come out. The east side of the building, they would go to the north and then turn left to head south down Tel-Hai Circle out to Beaver Dam Road.
Okay. Did anybody take into account that it floods down Beaver Dam and Burwell?
Yes.
I just didn't want to be a pain, but that's all I just wanted to say is, should there be another access point
And no,
for safety?
there absolutely is. There's two others. So if you come across Tel-Hai Circle, there's the drive that we noted on the north side of the pond, and then there's Tree Line Drive that comes down and accesses. I believe, based on the reports I've heard, the main access is the one that tends to flood more frequently.
Okay.
The Tree Line Drive is less subject to flooding.
Okay.
In the worst case scenario, they can traverse through the campus and out
the farmland to Park Road.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
stressing the safety. And then on those cottages down by the gun range, they do make ultra dense that you can put in those, just those cottages, the Rox wool. You ever heard of that? Where it's like extra soundproofing
Right.
and it's super quiet.
Yeah.
That way you can, maybe have it super soundproof. Okay, that's all.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to make a statement? Seeing none, we've covered a lot. If anybody, either the association, the township, or the applicant would like to make a closing statement, you may certainly do so at this time.
Brief closing statement. I prepared a memorandum of law to cover most of the position on the variances, in addition to what I've explained tonight and what the witnesses have explained tonight, so I can be brief. But essentially, all of the relief that's requested in the application that's before you this evening is dimensional variance relief under the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision known as Hertzberg and its progeny. Dimensional variance relief is of lesser moment than use variance relief. Of course, I know the board's aware of that. And you can take into consideration, in addition to the physical characteristics of the property we talked about this evening, you can also take economic factors into consideration as well. In addition to that, as we discussed and as your solicitor asked a number of questions about, all, if not most of this relief also qualifies, in my opinion, as de minimis dimensional variance relief. So that's even one step down from just standard dimensional variance relief. So with all that in mind, and given the testimony and evidence asked that the application be approved, and I'll hand this up to your solicitor and have a copy for you if you'd like it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does the association, would they like to enter any type of legal memorandum, have the opportunity to, or make any closing?
No, no, sir.
Okay, thank you. Township?
Exhibit A1 speaks for itself.
Thank you. All right. Do you have copies to be able to provide to either the township or the association?
Yes.
So with that, that closes this initial portion of the hearing to lead us to go into executive session to deliberate if that's what the board would like to do at this time. All right, so we'll please, well, as soon as we have any kind of decision, we'll come out and let you guys know.
That's good.
All right, so we're back on record. We're out of executive session after some deliberation. And I'm going to read off a proposed motion and make sure that's in line with what the board is requesting. Is there a motion to approve all 5 of the requested variances conditioned upon the terms of applicant's A1 exhibit? And so making sure, as trying to find the right way to frame it, that all of the other previous decisions and agreements are only modified as specifically requested here tonight. Everything else would still be in line with all of the 2008 decision, the 2008 agreement, and all the different modifications of A1.
Make a motion.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
And this would obviously be conditioned upon the applicant, in accordance with all their testimony and exhibits, remaining the same and being in compliance with that. So from today's date, the board will have 45 days to issue a written decision. The association, you will receive a copy of that,
any party standing has the opportunity to file an appeal to that decision within 30 days after the issuance of that date. But again, I thank everyone for their time, attention, and all the thorough presentations given by everybody here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you very much.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.